Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina was always complicated for me. While my older sister Charlotte excelled in school and my younger brother Leo charmed everyone with his smile, I seemed to attract trouble like a magnet. My grades were average at best, my friends were always the wrong crowd, and I had a tendency to speak my mind no matter how much it disturbed the harmony my parents cherished. The downtown apartment where we grew up was large enough for everyone, but somehow, I always felt cramped there. My father, Arthur, owned a chain of pharmacies that had spread throughout the Low Country. A serious man of few words, he had built an empire from nothing, with discipline and hard work, qualities he claimed I lacked. By 17, my father barely looked at me during dinner, and my mother, Eleanor, had perfected the art of disappointed silence. Her gaze, half sad, half irritated, followed me around the house like a shadow. "Michael," she would say, "why can't you be more like your sister?" The question echoed through the house on Sundays, when the family gathered for their traditional lunch. I never had a good enough answer. Family barbecues were a constant reminder of what I wasn't. I'd sit at the table listening to my siblings' achievements, scholarships, promotions, new houses, while I nursed a beer in the corner pretending not to care. My Uncle Gerald would always slap me on the back and say, "The family rebel, huh?" But what he really meant was, the failure. My sister Charlotte graduated from med school at Duke, married a successful engineer, and moved to a gated community in a posh suburb. Leo, 5 years younger than me, was already showing a talent for business at 15, helping our father at the pharmacies on weekends. And me? I dropped out of business school in my second semester, worked as a bartender, a used car salesman, and even as a bouncer at a club on King Street. I stopped trying to impress them. I left home early, rented a tiny apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, took temporary jobs, and made peace with the idea that I would never be more than a footnote in the family legacy. On the rare occasions I showed up for Sunday lunches, my mother would serve my plate with an almost imperceptible sigh, as if every bite I took was another disappointment to swallow. "You have potential, Michael," my father said once, in a rare moment of conversation. "But you waste it all with these choices." It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd received from him in years. By 27, I was used to my role as the black sheep. I had my own business, a small musical instrument shop on a side street that paid the bills. It wasn't my father's pharmaceutical empire, but it was mine. On weekends, I played guitar with a rock band in downtown bars. Nothing grand, just enough to keep that teenage dream of being a musician alive. Still, a part of me never stopped wondering why I was so different. Why my father looked at me as if I were a stranger. Why my siblings didn't seem to really see me. And why, despite my efforts, I couldn't shake the resentment that burned silently in my chest. People always said I didn't look like anyone in the family. While they all had brown eyes and straight hair, I had green eyes and curly hair. "He must take after a distant relative," my mother would always reply when someone commented, quickly changing the subject. Some nights, after a few glasses of whiskey, I would pull out the few family photos I kept and search for answers in the smiling faces. There was something in my father's eyes when he looked at me in old pictures, a different glint, almost guilty. Or maybe it was just my imagination, searching for meaning where there was none. Deep down, I knew there was something more, an unspoken secret, an empty space between us that no one dared to fill. But over time, I learned to live with it. I built my own life, my own identity, far from the shadow of their expectations. If I couldn't be the son they wanted, I would be the man I chose to be. I hadn't seen my father in almost 5 years when I got the call. I was organizing some CDs in the shop when my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered without much expectation. "Mr. Michael Vance?" The voice on the other end was formal, professional. "Yes, this is he." "This is Mr. Harrison, the Vance family's attorney. I'm sorry to inform you that your father, Arthur, passed away last night. A massive heart attack in his sleep." I stood in silence, my hand frozen in midair. I didn't know what to feel. Sadness? Anger? Relief? A customer walked into the shop and I signaled that I needed a minute. "I see," I finally replied. "Thank you for letting me know. Mr. Vance, your presence is requested for the reading of the will tomorrow at 2 p.m. at my office. The address is 1250 Meeting Street, Suite 300. That caught me by surprise. The reading of the will? Are you sure I need to be there? Absolutely. It was an explicit request from your father. Your presence is indispensable. I hung up, confused. We weren't close. Why would the family lawyer insist on my presence? I assumed it was a formality, perhaps a small gesture, from a guilty conscience. I closed the shop early and went home to pack some clothes. I'd have to drive nearly 4 hours back to the family home. I mentally prepared myself for cold stares and forced condolences. The next morning, I took I-26 heading towards Charleston. The sky was overcast, threatening rain, a fitting backdrop for a funeral. I tuned the radio to a random station, just to fill the silence. The songs played on, but my mind was elsewhere. Childhood memories, fights with my father, the last Christmas at home before I left, fragments of a relationship that was never completed. I arrived in the city around noon. I didn't go straight to the family house. Instead, I stopped at a diner in a historic neighborhood where my grandfather had started the first pharmacy in the chain. I ordered a coffee and a biscuit, more to kill time than out of hunger. The place was almost empty. Just an old man reading the newspaper at the counter and the owner watching the noon news on a small TV hanging in the corner. "Everything all right, son?" The owner, a man with a graying mustache, asked as he served my coffee. "More or less, I came back from my father's funeral." He made a sign of the cross. "May God rest his soul. Was he from around here?" "Yes, Arthur Vance from Vance Pharmacies." The man's eyes widened. "Mr. Vance?" "Wow, I didn't know. A respectable man. Helped a lot of people in this neighborhood." I nodded without saying anything. It was strange to hear someone speak well of my father. To me, he had always been a distant, severe figure. But to the rest of the city, he was a respected businessman, a local benefactor. Two sides of the same coin I could never reconcile. At 2 o'clock sharp, I parked in front of Mr. Harrison's office. The building was old but well-maintained, with a stone facade and tall windows. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The office smelled of old paper and polished wood. My siblings were already there, dressed in somber colors, their expressions unreadable. When I walked in, my sister Charlotte barely looked at me. She sat upright, her hands clasped in her lap. My brother Leo gave me a quick nod. My mother wasn't there. I later learned she had stayed home sedated. The shock had been too great. I sat apart, arms crossed, waiting for it to be over. That's when Mr. Harrison, a thin man with fine glasses, opened an envelope and cleared his throat. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Arthur Vance," he began, formally. "I will proceed directly to the main provisions." He adjusted his glasses and continued. "I, Arthur Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all assets, properties, and business holdings, to my son, Michael Vance." There was a long pause. I felt a strange ringing in my ears, as if someone had turned off the sound of the world. "Michael?" my sister asked, incredulous. "You mean him?" Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Yes, as recorded here, the entirety of the estate, including the main house, the pharmacy chain, the rural properties in the upstate, and all bank accounts and investments, will be transferred to Mr. Michael Vance." "This is absurd." Charlotte stood up, her face red. "He doesn't even work in the companies. He hasn't spoken to Dad in years." The lawyer remained calm. "The will is quite clear, ma'am. It was updated just 6 months ago with all legal formalities. Your father's wishes are expressed unequivocally." Leo was staring at the floor, his hands trembling slightly. I remained seated, motionless, the words not fully making sense in my head. Why would my father leave everything to me? Was this some kind of cruel joke? A final attempt to create chaos in the family? Is there any Explanation? I finally managed to ask. Any letter? Any reason? Mr. Harrison looked at me strangely, as if there was more he wanted to say but couldn't. The will speaks for itself, Mr. Vance. Your father was very specific about his wishes. If I may make a personal observation, he seemed quite determined when he signed this document. We left the office in silence. In the elevator, Charlotte stood as far away from me as possible. Leo tried a weak smile but failed. Outside, the rain had finally started to fall. Thick drops hit the hot asphalt, creating that characteristic smell of wet earth. "Let's talk about this," Leo said before getting into his car. "There must be an explanation." Charlotte said nothing. She just got into her imported SUV and sped off, the tires screeching on the wet asphalt. I stood on the sidewalk, feeling the rain gradually soak me. Suddenly I was the owner of an empire I never wanted, and somehow it felt like the loneliest thing in the world. The silence shattered into chaos. That night, the three of us stayed at the family mansion in the historic district. It felt like sleeping in a mausoleum. The house, with its antique mahogany furniture and oil paintings on the walls, seemed frozen in time. The guest room where I settled still had the same comforter from when I was a teenager, an insignificant detail that for some reason bothered me deeply. We had dinner in the main dining room, the one used only on special occasions. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, who had worked for the family since I was a child, served the food in silence, casting curious glances at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Charlotte barely spoke during dinner. She picked at her food with her fork, not really eating. Her eyes were red but hard as stone. Leo, always the mediator, tried to smooth things over, but his voice trembled. "Maybe Dad saw something in you that we didn't," he said, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. It didn't make sense. Our father had once told me I would never amount to anything. Now, I was the heir. "This is ridiculous." Charlotte finally broke the silence. "I'm going to contest this will. It's not fair. It's not natural." "It's a legal document, Charlotte," Leo argued gently. "Mr. Harrison said everything is in order." "And since when are you a legal expert?" she shot back, throwing her napkin on the table. "He wasn't even present in the last years of Dad's life. While we were taking care of the companies, the medical bills, everything. What was he doing? Playing guitar in dive bars?" I remained silent. What could I say? She was right in many respects. It didn't make sense that my father had chosen me. Part of me wanted to give it all up, go back to my simple life, to my instrument shop. But another part, a part I didn't recognize, wanted to understand why. I needed to know what had motivated my father. After dinner, I wandered the house. For hours, touching the cold banister, peeking into rooms that hadn't changed since childhood. My father's office was untouched, his leather chair turned toward the window, as if he had just stepped out for a coffee. On the bookshelf, family photos where I appeared less and less over the years. On the desk, a portrait of only my mother, young, smiling on some beach in the Carolinas. I sat in his chair feeling like an imposter. I opened a few drawers, not knowing exactly what I was looking for. Company papers, bank statements, nothing that really interested me. Something felt off. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was the way Mr. Harrison had looked at me after the reading. As if there was more he wanted to say but couldn't. The next morning, my mother arrived, dressed in black from head to toe, wearing sunglasses even inside the house. When she saw me in the living room, she stopped for a moment as if she hadn't expected to find me there. She slowly took off her glasses, revealing eyes swollen from crying. "Michael," she said, her tone neutral, controlled. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Mom," I replied, standing up to greet her. She accepted my hug stiffly, as if she were being photographed for a newspaper. "I heard about the will," she said, sitting on the sofa. Mrs. Gable appeared silently with a coffee tray. "It's an unusual situation. I don't understand," I confessed. "Why would Dad do this?" She took a sip of coffee, avoiding my gaze. Your father was always a man of surprising decisions. Maybe this is just one more of them. There was something in her tone, a certain calculated coldness, that bothered me, as if she were reciting a rehearsed script. You didn't talk about this? He didn't mention anything? Your father and I didn't talk about many things in recent years, Michael. She placed the cup on the table with excessive care. His marriage to his work was always stronger than his marriage to me. Charlotte entered the room at that moment, already dressed to go out, in a flawless black suit. She kissed her mother on the forehead and completely ignored my presence. I'm going to the office, Mom. There are some urgent matters to attend to. What matters? I asked, standing up. The companies are now my responsibility, aren't they? She stared at me with icy eyes. Someone has to keep things running while you decide whether to sell everything or bankrupt Dad's legacy in record time. Charlotte, my mother reprimanded her, but without much conviction. It's the truth, Mom. He knows nothing about the business. He's going to destroy everything Dad built. She left, slamming the door. My mother sighed, massaging her temples. Give her time, she said. It was a shock for all of us. That afternoon, I decided to visit the corporate headquarters of Vance Pharmacies, a modern glass and steel building in the city's business district. On the way, I passed 3 of the chain's stores. It was strange to think that all of this now belonged to me. At the reception, the young woman's eyes widened when I identified myself. Apparently, the news had already spread. I was led to the main office, which had been my father's. Leo was waiting for me there, surrounded by folders and spreadsheets. I thought you'd come, he said without looking up from the documents. We need to talk about the transition. What transition? The transition of power, Michael. You're the new CEO, officially. But we need a period of adjustment. You don't know the business, the suppliers, the key employees. I sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. Leo, why did he do this? Why did he choose me? My brother finally looked up. He looked as tired as I did. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. He didn't consult anyone, not even Mom. We were silent for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Through the window, you could see the entire city, spreading out as far as the eye could see. Somewhere down there was my small instrument shop, probably closed for the 3rd day in a row. There's something strange about all this, I finally said. It's not just the inheritance, it's like there's a secret behind it. Leo frowned. What kind of secret? I don't know. But don't you find it strange? After years of treating me like a disappointment, suddenly he leaves me everything. There has to be something more. My brother glanced around as if checking if we were alone. There is one thing, he said quietly. Last week, before the heart attack, Dad called me in here. He seemed nervous, anxious. He said he needed to fix something, an old mistake. I thought he was talking about some problem in the company, but now you think he was talking about the will? Maybe, or maybe something bigger, something that the will is just a part of. That night I returned to the mansion with a strange feeling in my stomach. Something didn't add up. It wasn't just the inheritance, it was the way everyone was, reacting to it, as if there were layers and layers of unspoken secrets. Lying in the bed that was once mine, staring at the ceiling where there were still glow-in-the-dark star stickers, I made a promise to myself. I would find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. 2 days later, I found it. I was going through documents in my father's office at the mansion when I noticed something odd about the old solid wood desk. The center drawer had a bottom that seemed shallower than the sides. I ran my fingers along the inside and felt a small bump. I pressed it and heard a click. A secret compartment. Inside was a yellowed envelope addressed to me in my father's Mbeo, unmistakable handwriting. That strong, almost aggressive cursive I knew well from the notes he used to leave on the fridge during my adolescence. Parent-teacher conference today. Back late, don't wait up. Talk to your mother about your grades. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The paper was thin, as if it had been handled many times before being stored there. The content was short, but enough to shift the ground beneath my feet. Michael, if you are reading this, then the truth is finally where it should be. You always wondered why you were different. The answer is simple. You are not Eleanor's son. She never forgave me for the affair. But you were the best thing that came out of my worst mistake. I tried to keep my distance to protect you. From her. From them. But you were always my son. And now everything I've built is yours. Your real name was supposed to be Gabriel. That was the name your biological mother chose. But when you arrived, Eleanor insisted on Michael. It was her father's name. I think it was her way of trying to accept the situation. Your biological mother's name was Helena. She was a piano teacher at the Municipal Conservatory. She was my student when I was young, and then when we met again, things just happened. She died in childbirth. Complications, the doctor said. I never forgave myself for not being there. Her family never knew about you. It was what she wanted. To protect everyone from scandal, from judgment. They moved to the Midwest after she died. I think it was for the best. Eleanor agreed to raise you as our son. But the resentment was always there, hidden in the corners of our house, in the silences during dinner, in the way she looked at you. I try not to blame her. What I asked of her wasn't fair. I know I was an absent, distant father. I tried to compensate for it by being strict, demanding. I thought that way I was preparing you for a world that would be even harder on you. But now I realize I just pushed you away. The fear of getting close, and Eleanor interpreting it as favoritism, well, it paralyzed me. I had been sick for some time when I decided to change my will. The doctors gave me 6 months at most. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want the pity, the sidelong glances, the whispers. You know how I hate weakness. I'm leaving everything to you because it's what's fair. Charlotte and Leo had what you never had. A complete family, my time, my attention. They'll have to understand that someday. In a folder in the safe behind the painting in the living room, the combination is your date of birth. There are documents about Helena. Some photos, letters we exchanged, and the original birth certificate with your real name. I thought you might want to know more about her. I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I hope that one day you will understand that, in my own flawed and insufficient way, I tried to love you. Your father, Arthur. The letter fell to the floor. I staggered back, breathless. My mother wasn't my mother. My siblings weren't entirely my siblings. All those years of being the family outcast, it wasn't my imagination. It was blood. The lie had shaped my entire existence. I sat in my father's chair, the letter still on the floor like a bomb that had just exploded, scattering shards of truth everywhere. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The strange looks from my mother, no, from Eleanor when I was a child. My father's distance, alternating between coldness and an almost obsessive protection. The subtle physical differences that were always attributed to some distant relative. My head was spinning with revelations. Helena. My mother's name was Helena. She played the piano. She died giving birth to me. My name was supposed to be Gabriel. Gabriel. I repeated the name a few times as if trying on a new suit. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like me. After 30 years of being Michael, I couldn't imagine myself as anyone else. I picked up the letter from the floor and read it again, looking for more details, more clues about this woman who gave birth to me and whom I would never know. A piano teacher at the Municipal Conservatory. There might be records, colleagues who knew her, students who took lessons from her, and there were photos and letters in the safe, according to my father. I got up and went to the main living room. The painting that hid the safe was an oil-on canvas depicting the family farm in the upstate, where my paternal grandfather had started his life before moving to the city. I carefully removed the painting and revealed the safe built into the wall. I typed in my date of birth, 06151988. The safe opened with a metallic click. Inside were several meticulously organized folders. My father was always obsessive about order. One of them, smaller than the others, had just one name handwritten on it. Helena. I took it out carefully, as if it were a sacred object. In a way, it was. I went back to the office and placed the folder on the desk. I hesitated before opening it. Once I saw those photos, once I read those letters, there would be no going back. The image I had of my family, of my origin, would change forever. But I had come too far to turn back. The first photo showed a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, sitting at a piano. She had dark, curly hair and light eyes, green, like mine. She was smiling at the camera with a serene, almost shy expression. On the back, a date. Helena Conservatory, 1987. She was pregnant with me in this photo, but it wasn't noticeable yet. The letters were arranged by date. The oldest was from January 1987, the last from October of the same year, shortly before my birth. They were love letters, full of plans for the future, mentions of secret meetings, the guilt they felt, but also the joy when they discovered the pregnancy. They seemed to truly love each other despite the circumstances. In one of the last letters, Helena wrote, "I know it won't be easy, my love. Your family, your position in the city, everything complicates things. But when I feel our son move inside me, I know it's worth it. He will be strong like you and a dreamer like me. We'll call him Gabriel, as we discussed. Gabriel, the messenger, the one who brings news. And what more beautiful news could there be than love, even born in the most unlikely circumstances? Don't worry about me. I'm fine, just tired. The doctor said it's normal at this stage. 2 more months and we'll have our little Gabriel in our arms." She never got to hold me. She died before that. And my father, by agreement or imposition, gave me to be raised by his legitimate wife as the couple's son. The original birth certificate was there too. Gabriel Hayes Vance, born on November 15, 1988, son of Arthur Vance and Helena Hayes. There was also a second certificate issued days later, which listed Michael Vance, son of Arthur and Eleanor Vance. My original identity, erased with an official stamp. I stayed there for hours, immersed in the memories of people I barely knew or knew under false pretenses. The sun was already setting when I heard the front door open. Familiar voices echoed down the hall. My mother and Charlotte returning from some engagement. I quickly put everything back in the folder except for my father's letter. That one I folded and put in my pocket. It was time to confront them with the truth. I waited until breakfast. I couldn't sleep well, tossing and turning all night, rereading the letter, looking at the photos of Helena, my biological mother, a woman who died bringing me into the world, whose face I would only know from faded photographs. Mrs. Gable served breakfast on the back porch, as was the Sunday family tradition. The table was carefully set, white linen tablecloth, antique porcelain dishes, polished silver coffee pot. Still warm biscuits, blueberry muffins, seasonal fruit cut into precise pieces. The normality of the scene contrasted violently with the turmoil I felt inside. My mother, Eleanor, was already seated, flipping through a magazine with little interest. She wore a navy blue silk robe and her hair was tied in a loose bun. Charlotte arrived shortly after, still in her pajamas, checking her phone as she walked. Leo was the last, dressed for a run, sweating slightly. "Good morning," he said, pouring himself some orange juice. "Anyone seen the paper?" "Your father has it," Eleanor replied automatically, then stopped, realizing her mistake. An awkward silence fell over the table. I poured myself some coffee, observing them. It was strange to look at these people now, knowing the truth. I looked for signs, clues I might have missed before. The way Eleanor avoided looking at me directly. The slight resemblance between Charlotte and Leo that I never shared. I placed the letter on the table, right in the center, between the breadbasket and the butter. Eleanor was the first to notice. Her eyes fixed on the paper, then rose to meet mine. For a long moment she said nothing. "I never wanted you to find this," she finally whispered. Charlotte and Leo looked confused, first at the letter, then at me, and finally at Eleanor. "What is this, Mom?" Charlotte asked, picking up the paper. Her eyes ran over the lines and her expression gradually changed. Surprise, shock, and then something close to horror. Is this true?" Leo took the letter from her hands and read it quickly. He turned pale, visibly shaken. "So that's why the will. You're not our brother?" Charlotte asked, her voice wavering between anger and confusion. "Half-brother," I corrected, my voice bitter. And she knew the whole time. I pointed at Eleanor, who remained strangely calm, as if she had been preparing for this moment for decades. Eleanor stood up slowly, her mouth tense. "It was a mistake," she said. "A mistake I had to live with. A mistake your father tried to compensate for in his own way. Do you think this letter absolves him? You were always a reminder of his betrayal." The room fell silent again. The chirping of birds in the garden seemed surreal in contrast to the tension that hung between us. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why agree to raise me if you hated me so much?" "I didn't hate you," she replied after a pause. "I hated what you represented. The humiliation, the gossip I had to swallow for years. That boy doesn't look like anyone in the family. People would say at the country club, how do you think I felt?" "And Dad?" Leo asked. "Why did he never tell us?" "Your father lived for appearances," Eleanor replied, pouring herself more coffee with a studied calm. "The great Arthur Vance couldn't have an illegitimate child running around the city. It would have been a scandal. His precious reputation would have been ruined." "He could have chosen to be with her," I said. "With Helena." The name provoked an immediate reaction in Eleanor. Her eyes narrowed and she gripped her cup so tightly I thought it would break. "Helena," she repeated, the name as if it were an obscene word. "The fragile and talented Helena, so young, so special. You have no idea what it was like. He came home one day and simply announced that he had a son with another woman, that she had died, and that the baby would come to live with us. As our son, as if it were the most natural thing in the world." "And you accepted?" Charlotte asked, incredulous. "What did you want me to do?" "Divorce wasn't an option back then, not for someone in our position. I had 2 small children, I had no income of my own, and he..." She hesitated. "He said if I didn't accept, he would leave with you. He would leave everything behind." I looked at her, surprised. "He threatened you?" "Not exactly. He was desperate. In love. Guilty. A dangerous combination." She ran a hand through her hair, dislodging her perfectly arranged bun. "I gave in. On conditions. You would be raised as our son. No one but us would know the truth, and he would never ever mention Helena again." "And he accepted that?" I asked, unable to imagine my father, always so dominant, yielding to such terms. "He had no choice. I could have ruined everything too, if I wanted. Imagine the scandal. The respectable businessman who got a piano teacher 20 years his junior pregnant." Leo looked stunned. "So our whole childhood, all those fights between you two, weren't just about the business or the money," Eleanor completed. "They were about him, about the fact that every time I looked at him I saw him looking for you, Michael, or Gabriel, or whoever you are." Charlotte, who had been silent for some time, suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "This changes everything, doesn't it? The will, the companies, he left everything to you because he felt guilty." "It's not just that," I replied. "He left everything to me because you two had already received something I never had." "What?" Charlotte asked, her tone defiant. "A real family." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Eleanor looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. Leo looked like he was about to cry. "That's not fair," Charlotte finally said. "It wasn't our fault." "Nor mine," I retorted. "But I spent my whole life feeling like there was something wrong with me, that I was the black sheep, the problem, the disappointment. Meanwhile, you were the perfect children, the natural heirs. All because I was the constant reminder of a mistake no one wanted to face. Eleanor stood up again, this time with less composure. You have no idea what it cost me, Michael, to raise my husband's mistress's child, to hear people commenting on how you didn't look like anyone in the family, to see Arthur looking at you with that expression of guilt and adoration he never had for our children. Your children, I corrected, not ours. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. It wasn't anger or resentment, but something close to remorse. I tried, she said, her voice almost a whisper. In the beginning, I really tried to love you as my own. But every time you smiled, every gesture, everything reminded me of her. The woman who almost destroyed my marriage simply by existing. Helena has been dead for 30 years, I said. Don't you think it's time to stop blaming her? To stop blaming me? The silence that followed was almost deafening. Leo was the first to break it. I always knew there was something, he said. I didn't know what, but I felt it. The way Dad treated you, it was different. More intense somehow. So intense that he let me leave home without trying to stop me, I asked bitterly. So intense that he barely spoke to me in recent years? He was trying to protect you the only way he knew how, Eleanor said, surprising everyone. By keeping his distance. He knew that the closer he got to you, the harder it would be for all of us. The revelation hung over us like a heavy cloud. We were strangers sitting at the breakfast table, bound by lies and half-truths that were now disintegrating before our eyes. Weeks passed. The entire city was talking about Arthur Vance's will and his surprising decision to leave everything to his rebel son. No one outside our family knew the full truth, and we decided to keep it that way. Some lies are hard to undo after so long. The estate was officially transferred to my name. Charlotte and Leo briefly contested the will, but the letter sealed its fate. My father's intentions were clear. There was resentment, yes, but also a strange and unexpected respect that began to emerge between us. Leo was the first to extend a hand. We met for coffee on a historic street, at a bakery that had been there since we were children. For the first time, we spoke as equals, no tension, just truth. I always admired you, you know, he said, surprising me. The courage to follow your own path, to defy Dad. I never had that courage. It wasn't courage, I replied. It was survival. I knew I would never be the son he wanted. And now we find out you were exactly the son he wanted. Leo smiled sadly. Ironic, isn't it? We talked for hours. About our childhood, about the business empire that was now my responsibility, about the future. When we said goodbye, he hugged me, a genuine, unreserved hug. Half-brother or not, you'll always be my brother, he said. Something inside me, something that had been broken for a long time, slowly began to heal. Charlotte took longer. Her pride was greater, her disappointment deeper. But 2 weeks after the confrontation, she showed up at the mansion unannounced. I found her in the backyard garden looking at the yellow-flowered tree our father had planted when they bought the house. Are you going to tear it down? She asked without turning around. Why would I do that? Because you can. Because everything is yours now. I stood beside her, watching the yellow flowers that covered the branches. I don't think of it that way. This house, all of this, it's just things. Things that are worth millions, she retorted, but without her usual hostility. I'm thinking of turning the house into a foundation, I said, a music conservatory, in honor of Helena. Charlotte turned to me surprised. A conservatory? She was a piano teacher. It seems appropriate. We were silent for a moment. A hummingbird hovered over the garden, flowers, its wings beating so fast they were just a blur. I need to show you something, Charlotte finally said. She took her phone out of her pocket and showed me an old photo. A girl of about 5 sitting at a piano with a man beside her. My father, much younger. I found this in Mom's old albums. Look at the date. The photo was from 1986, a year before my birth. The man in the photo was definitely my father, and the girl, it had to be Charlotte. I used to take piano lessons at the conservatory, she explained. I hated it, actually. But Dad insisted. Now I understand why. Helena, I murmured. That must have been how they met. He took me to my lessons twice a week. The realization hit me like a punch. My father hadn't just betrayed his family, he had used his own daughter as an excuse to see his mistress. The complexity of the man he was made me dizzy. I'm sorry, I said, not knowing exactly what I was apologizing for. It's not your fault, Charlotte replied. And for the first time since we discovered the truth, she smiled at me, a small, hesitant, but real smile. I kept the instrument shop. I hired a manager to handle the day-to-day, but I still showed up to help on weekends. It was my refuge when the weight of Vance Industries became oppressive. At the corporate office, I worked side by side with Leo, learning the details of the business that was now mine. Charlotte decided to go her own way. She opened a pediatric clinic in a family-oriented neighborhood, something she had always wanted to do, but never had the courage to while our father was alive. Eleanor moved to an apartment in a newer part of town. Too many memories, was all she said when she announced her decision. Before she left, she handed me a shoebox full of my baby and childhood photos. I kept them all, she said, even when it hurt to look at them. Our relationship remained complicated. Decades of resentment don't disappear overnight. But there was a new respect between us, a silent acknowledgement that we had both been victims of other people's choices. I renovated the house. I brought light into old rooms. I had some of the heavy, dark furniture removed that had always made the place feel like a mausoleum. I painted the walls in light colors, replaced the heavy curtains with blinds that let in the morning sun. One of the first rooms I transformed was the room that was supposed to be mine, the guest room where I had stayed in those first few days, after my father's death. I turned it into a small music studio, with my guitar and a baby grand piano I bought specifically for the space. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit at that piano and try to imagine Helena playing. My fingers, which had never been formally trained, would feel their way across the keys, searching for some connection to the woman who gave me life. One of those nights, Leo found me there. He came in quietly and listened to my clumsy attempts to pick out a melody. "It's never too late to learn," he said, startling me. "I'm too old to start from scratch." He smiled. "Dad started taking guitar lessons at 40, didn't you know?" I didn't know. There were so many things about my father I never knew, that I would never know. 3 months after finding the letter, I visited the municipal cemetery. Helena was buried there, in a simple grave with only her name and the dates. My father had taken care of that too, paying for the perpetual care of the plot. I brought flowers, white orchids, and stood for a while in silence before the headstone. "Hi, Mom," I said finally. The words sounded strange in my ears. I told her about my life, about discovering the truth, about the plans for the foundation that would bear her name. I talked about my father, about how he had, in his own flawed way, tried to do the right thing. I cried a little, and felt foolish for crying for someone I never knew but who was so intrinsically linked to who I was. On my way out of the cemetery, I met an elderly woman who was tending a nearby grave. She was watching me with curiosity. "You're Helena's son, aren't you?" she asked, surprising me. "How do you know?" "The eyes," she smiled. "You have her eyes." I was her colleague at the conservatory. I always thought there was something strange about the story of her death, but no one ever talked about it. I spent an hour talking with the woman, Mrs. Marcia, absorbing every detail she remembered about Helena. Her laugh, her exceptional talent at the piano, her kindness to difficult students. Small fragments of a life that helped me piece together a puzzle that would never be complete, but now had more pieces than before. The Helena Hayes Foundation was inaugurated 6 months later. The old Vance family mansion, transformed into a music conservatory offering free lessons to children from public schools. In the main hall, where the formal dining room used to be, we installed a grand piano. And on the wall, an enlarged photo of Helena at the piano, her serene smile watching over the new students. Eleanor attended the inauguration, to everyone's surprise. She walked slowly through the hall, observing the changes, and stopped in front of Helena's photo. She was very beautiful, she said simply. Yes, she was. You look like her. I looked at Eleanor, expecting to see the usual resentment, but there was only a weary acceptance in her eyes. Thank you for coming, I said. She nodded. Your father would have approved of this transformation. As she turned to leave, I called out to her. You know, no matter what happened, you were the mother I knew, the only one who raised me. She stopped, her back rigid, and for a moment I thought she would ignore my words. But then her shoulders relaxed slightly. I could have been better, she admitted in a low voice. We all could have. That night, after everyone had gone, I was alone in the main hall. I sat at the piano and played the few notes I had learned in recent weeks, the beginning of Für Elise, the piece that, according to Mrs. Marcia, was Helena's favorite. I was no longer just the problem child, nor just the surprise heir. I was Michael, or Gabriel if you prefer, son of Helena and Arthur, raised by Eleanor, half-brother to Charlotte and Leo. Not just a footnote in the family legacy, but an entire chapter, unexpected, and now finally acknowledged. I looked out, the window at the moonlit garden, at the yellow-flowered tree my father had planted decades ago. Its deep roots, its bright flowers, so different from the other trees in the garden, yet undeniably belonging to that space. Just like me.